I was thinking about you yesterday, dude. I just did a charity softball game in Georgia with a bunch of celebrities and veterans, all to raise money for veteran causes. And second play of the game, I fucking tore my calf.
Get the fuck out of here. Are you serious?
Yeah. And I was like just fielding a ground ball, nothing impact, nothing at all. And I'm right next to Alex Hugo, who's probably like the best softball player in the world.
Yeah.
And she just slides over and does my job and her job seamlessly.
Oh, there you go.
So, like,
no worries.
Nobody was even impacted by me getting hurt. Is what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was good for you to be there, but
yeah,
no worries.
Yeah, I raised a lot of money, but now I can't walk. No big deal.
Bro, it's so funny because so my son just started playing flag football, right? And there is like this MMA studio like right around the corner from where he plays flag. And so I was like, you know what? Instead of sitting here for an hour and a half and watching him play flag, I'll go do that while he's practicing. And so I did like the trial last night, which was great. And I walk in and I swear to you, the class is like 90% high school kids, like juniors and seniors.
Yeah.
That wrestling, kind of know a little jujitsu, not a whole lot. And so after 45 minutes of like 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, rotate between kids, dude, I woke up this morning like, what the fuck? I feel like I got hit by, and I was telling Bob, I was the funny thing is like I know enough where like it wasn't really an issue rolling with them, but young, full of energy, full of testosterone, like for 45 minutes, I was like, man, that was more than I needed on a Monday night. Like I think
you got to go back. That's the real question.
Oh yeah. Oh, I'm gonna go back. Not tonight, but I'll go back.
Softball career's on hold.
Yeah, you're
now anyway.
You're done for the minute.
Next year we'll go back.
That's it, dude.
Maybe stretch out a little more.
That's it. Yeah.
At least I could. It was the second play of the game. That was the worst part. Yeah,
you're like Aaron Rodgers, dude.
I practice and was ripping dingers, and I'm like, all right, man, I'm gonna do good here. And yeah, second play of the game, I shit the bed.
Bang, dude. Hey, it happens. It happens, dude.
Yeah.
So tell us what you're doing now, man. For those that don't know.
Yeah, so I guess I'll give you the wave tops, and then if you have questions, just send them my way. But I retired from the SEAL teams in 2020, and medically retired after 18 years, and really still felt the call to service, which is why I had joined the Navy in the first place. Was right after 9/11. I wanted to do something to help and to give back and to fight and protect the country, and I felt that was the best way that I could do it. So when I retired in 2020, I still had that. And I didn't know what I wanted to do necessarily in the next chapter, but I knew I wanted to do something that could help. And I had this really unique knowledge set of, hey, I just spent almost 2 decades in combat. And how does that translate to what I can do next to give back to somebody? And I started a for-profit company. And the goal of the company was to train law enforcement, specifically focused on patrol officers and school resource officers. And as a dad, my kids were still young, elementary and junior high at the time. And every time I drop them off, I'm concerned. I'm worried. Well, what happens if an active shooter shows up at my kid's school? Who's coming to save them? And not to discredit law enforcement, but they're not trained to do that. But they're the only ones that can do it. And so I took that personally, and I said, well, I'm going to start this company. It'll be able to hire veterans, guys from the command, and make some money and share the knowledge. And realize really quickly that the only people calling me to work were the government, so the military, and the federal agencies. Occasionally, I'd get a higher level SWAT team that would want to train, but on the weekends, my buddies would call me up, and I'd go do it for free because they just couldn't afford it. And you watching TV in 2020, 2021, and the body cameras are prevalent. Everything is prevalent in law enforcement because there's a huge defund movement going on. There's a lot of controversy over police. There's a lot of these critical incidents that are playing out, and the reputation of law enforcement is getting really discredited and invalidated. And I'm watching the same video in most cases, realizing, hey, man, they're not doing this on purpose.
Right.
They're doing this because they don't know what to do. Like, that's panic. That's fear. That's not willful, wanton abuse of power. And not to say that doesn't happen. It does, and it has happened. And I think most of the times it does happen, it gets dealt with properly. We're a long way from where we were 10, 20, 30 years ago. But I think we're so used to blaming the officer or the department for these issues without finding the proper solutions to it. And I'm coming from 20 years almost of sustained combat operations where every time I go out the door and get in a gunfight, it's an active shooter situation. It's dealing with stress to make critical life and death decisions better. It's being able to come off those missions and reorganize your program and your SOPs and your TTPs so that the next time you go out, you do it even better and it's safer and you're making better decisions. So I felt pretty bad that I'm sitting here charging people whatever the money was, and the people that really needed the help couldn't get it.
Yeah.
And that was in itself the premise for the nonprofit. So in 2022, I started making phone calls. I talked to other guys that I worked with. I talked to a lot of the police officers that I've trained over the years. I don't know if you remember Paul Fitzgerald, but he was the superintendent of Boston Police Department, and he's had a lot of interaction with the command, with the teams. And, we had a really in-depth conversation. He actually jumped on board and has helped me with this, but we decided to start a nonprofit. And January 22, we formulated Community First Project, and we spent the next 5 or 6 months building out that business plan and coming up with ideas for training and fundraising. Our goal was community safety, and it still is. Our goal is also mental health in both the military side and the law enforcement side. And third is to employ veterans, specifically from Army and Navy Tier 1 Special Operations. So we built a business plan. I sent it out to anybody who would read it to get feedback, and specifically to politicians on both sides of the aisle, because I wanted to be very adamant that this isn't about law enforcement. This isn't about military. This isn't about training. This is about community safety. And community safety is everybody's problem. Therefore, it requires everybody to be a part of the solution. So we made a lot of changes based on the feedback we got from both sides of the aisle to make it a nonpartisan effort to make this happen. In August of 22, we held our first fundraiser pretty concurrently with our first training, and we raised $340,000 in about 3 hours. Ooh. And people were just on board. And I've seen that in the 2 years since. We're over $1 million raised now, and training about over 1,000 cops. And everybody that I speak to about this buys in. I mean, that doesn't necessarily translate to dollars, but it translates to support. It translates to knowledge, people helping me along the way. It translates to buy-in from law enforcement, to buy-in from communities, from schools, from school committees, from our community, from people wanting to be instructors and share the knowledge. It's been significant, and it took off so fast that we just couldn't keep up with the demand. So, the great part about what we did is people love it, and people want help, and people see it as a viable solution to the response to these situations, right? Yeah. It's not the solution to preventing these situations from happening, which is what we want. But until that time comes, we're going to figure out the best possible response so we can save as many lives as possible when these things do happen, when an active shooter happens, when an incident of domestic terror happens, when a car or just a traffic stop or a warrant service turns violent. Like, we want these departments and these officers to make better decisions under stress, for their safety, for the safety of all the civilians and innocents around, for the safety of the children and the community members, and even the safety of the people committing the crime. And right now, I can only afford to train about 1 out of 10 departments that reaches out to me. And I have departments reaching out to me on a weekly basis. And it's just more motivation for me to raise more money, to keep going and to keep pushing. And that's what we're doing. And I love doing it. I'm learning on the fly. I don't have an MBA. My master's is in strategic leadership. And obviously I grew up throughout the military. So I've been learning the business side on the fly with a lot of help from some really, really good people. And we're making it work.
Dude, that's worth the calf, I would say.
Yeah.
So, dude, head is spinning because there are a number of different things that I want to ask. And the first thing that I'll ask that's like front of mind right now, or it's like the last thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of different scenarios that you're training for. You're training for stress, but you could have a traffic stop. You could have an active shooter at a school. Again, you don't have to answer, or we can cut it out, whatever. is there a different kind of training for each situation, or is it like, no, this level of training will supply you with the tools you need for all of them? Are there tiers? Are there levels? Kind of how is your training, quote unquote, designed? Or is it like, no, active shooter, this is what you do?
Yep. So it's really designed around green team. And the irony of that is it doesn't matter what level I'm training, the training starts at the same. It starts with fundamentals
Yeah.
because we have these departments. And I like to caveat this with I am very supportive of law enforcement, of police, of the officers, but I'm very critical of the departments and the policymakers and the people writing the budget because I think the training in law enforcement is very antiquated.
Yeah.
And we see that a lot in the military as well. Maybe not in the special operations side, but definitely in the military. So we focus on the basics. And it's like if I have a SWAT team vice a patrol officer, we're going to crush the fundamentals because they should be pretty proficient at that. But
Right.
we're going to go back and make sure that they are. We're going to crawl before we walk, before we run, right? Which you've heard a million times working with us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we work with the SWAT teams, we're going to develop a lot quicker and we're going to cover a lot more stuff because they have a working proficiency on tactics. But we're talking about patrol officers, school resource officers, beat cops that have minimal firearms experience other than shooting quals once a year and minimal tactics other than maybe if they're lucky they did something in their academy. So now we're asking these people to respond to the highest level of critical incident, a dev group mission, which is a hostage rescue, and they have the least amount of training. So what we need to figure out is where their fundamentals are. And so the way we do on green team, where we start with day one, 2-man pistol dry, we bring that mentality into policing, and we start giving them this feeling of, oh wait, I can do this, I can see this, it's comforting. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do in a 40-hour course is give them a little bit more time, split seconds, to make a better decision under stress.
Mm-hmm.
That is what it's all about. We use hostage rescue, active shooter, because it's the hardest and it's going to create the most stress for these individuals. But what we're teaching can be applied to any part of their job because really it's stress inoculation through experiential learning, meaning we're putting them in situations like we do on our RMTs where they have to make those decisions and it's as realistic as we can make it without actually shooting at them.
Right.
And the heart rate goes up, the physiological and the physical response is there. And now they have to make a critical decision on whether or not to use their weapon. And man, that sure sounds like de-escalation, right? It's a natural de-escalation technique through stress inoculation. But we're also teaching them ways that they can buy themselves that little bit of time so that their initial response isn't, oh shit, pull my gun, shoot somebody. And then they realize that person didn't have a gun, they had a phone, or that was a kid, or they rushed their shots and missed and hit somebody they didn't intend to hit. That's what we're seeing, right? That's what we're seeing in law enforcement when these critical incidents turn bad.
Right.
So yeah, it's funny. I still will train SWAT and higher level departments. Typically, it might not be through the nonprofit, or there might be some costs associated with it because we really want to affect the people without the training. But the training is very similar and it starts in the same place, but it will progress a lot faster.
Real quick, man, can you give a brief explanation of what green team is, since you referenced it, and what RMTs are, just for people that will be unfamiliar with some of this vernacular?
Yeah, so development group, which is the Navy's Tier 1 special operations, it's the highest level a SEAL can get to in their career. There is a selection course that SEALs will have to go to get into that command. Yep. And we call that selection green team. And it's an 8-month course that really focuses on fundamentals of CQB as the primary way to weed people out. And there's about a 50 to 60% attrition rate, the majority of whom don't make it for how they process CQB. And I say process because it's not that they can't do it. It's really about those people that can handle the stress of the situation and fix the mistakes that they're going to make, because everybody makes them, and not make them again.
Yeah.
Right. So it's learn on the fly.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, there's a lot of great SEALs that won't make it through that course because they can't do that very specific thing at the rate that it takes to make it through.
CQB.
CQB. Right. We lose most of the guys doing CQB.
And what is that?
Close quarters battle.
There you go. Cool.
What was the second part of that question?
And then I just said, what does RMT stand for again?
Oh,
Some
I'm
of
sorry.
the
Realistic military training, and obviously, our mission is around the world, and
Mhm.
if we have a mission in an urban environment, we need to be able to respond. And a lot of the facilities we have on bases just aren't either big enough or accurate enough to depict what we might see overseas.
Yeah.
So we partner with different police agencies to use their training facilities, which typically consists of an abandoned building somewhere, or school, or hospital, or an office building, and they allow us to do our realistic style training in that environment. And in turn, we
Yes.
train them with what we learn, because it's the way that we can give back. We can't pay them to do that, but
Yeah. Dude, I know I've connected with you. My son's 11,
mhm.
and I don't know if you heard what happened in Buckeye last week. We're in Buckeye, Arizona.
Yep.
There was a just for short context, there was a Facebook message circulated by someone saying that they were going to attack schools in the Buckeye area, and it just said Buckeye. And so every community in the United States that is called Buckeye responded the exact same way we did. There's a Buckeye in Ohio, there's a Buckeye in Louisiana, and it just said Buckeye, right? And so that led to a lockdown of his school, of which I had mentioned to you is the second one that he's been in. He's 11. And um, he just informed me 2 days ago that the school is going to have 3 lockdown drills a year to teach the kids how to or what to do during a lockdown. If they're in the bathroom, this is what you do. If you're in
Yeah.
the classroom, this is what you do. When we were growing up, we had fire drills. They now have lockdown drills. Very, very different kind of place that we're at. And we are out. When I say that we're out, our community is 12 miles from the main road.
Right.
Um, I don't. You're working in this space, and you may not have the answer to this next question, but in your what is going on? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
what is going on?
I can speak on personal opinion, but at
Right.
the end of the day, man, it's far too acceptable these days for someone to pick up a gun and start executing people, which
Yes.
is unbelievable to me that that's where we're at. So, is there a mental health issue? Absolutely. Is there like a desensitization issue? I think so. Yes. Is there a firearm issue? Yes. Like all these issues are happening in our country right now,
Right.
and I don't have the solution to any of them. And I don't think we're any closer to having a solution to them than we were when Columbine happened,
Right.
because we just want to sit here and fight about what the root cause is and not try to fix the problems, or we want to treat the symptoms and not go try to fix the underlying problem, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, you could ban guns, every single gun, tomorrow, and this would still be a threat for the next 2 decades,
Yep.
right? At the end of the day, there's so many things you could do that call it a knee-jerk reaction. It isn't going to fix the problem immediately, because I don't think there's one solution to it.
Right.
And the first thing we need to figure out is how to communicate effectively across the aisle to be able to talk about real solutions, instead of pointing the finger at other people and saying, hey, yeah, no, that idea is terrible because of this. That idea is terrible because of this. Well, okay, if it's terrible, let's find that middle ground and start fixing the problem. Because people like me are working as long as that problem's there. My problem
Right.
is my solution is a band-aid. I'm not
Right.
fixing the problem. I'm just trying to save lives until we can figure out what the fuck's going on. And unfortunately, I have a job. I wish I didn't. I would love to be out of work. I would love to be focused on something else that didn't involve kids or families losing kids, because it's horrible as a parent to worry about your child every time they leave the house, because you got maniacs out there with access to weapons at whatever age. And it's a scary world. And I'm not a anti-gun advocate. I made a living off carrying guns for however many years, and I still have guns, and I'll carry concealed. And I know that I know how to use them, but a lot of people have access to guns that don't.
Right.
And it's what's even scarier is a lot of police officers have access to guns that don't know how to use them.
And dude, that was my next thing. Of course, when it happened last week, I had sent you a message right
Mhm.
away. I was like,
Yep.
man, we gotta fucking get and you and I have talked on and off, and I had approached one. officer that's a friend of mine who's in the police department, and I think he wasn't open to it because he's nearing retirement. He's like, I'm not going to take on this project.
Sure.
Cool. But I immediately thought, man, I want to get in touch with the principal and Buckeye PD because we're out here, and by the time they get here, they need to know exactly what they're doing. And I'm not being an asshole, but I want to know because we're 12 miles out, which means it's going to take you some time to get here. When you get here, you guys better be nails at whatever's going on. Are you finding resistance from some departments around feeling like they need to be trained in this? I know you're getting a ton of support,
Yeah.
but is there the opposite where they're like, no, we don't need this?
I don't really find resistance from departments. I would say I've had a couple instances of pushback. One was from a rather liberal, wealthy town in Colorado whose city council didn't want military training police officers. So they didn't even want to entertain what the training was. It was just the perception of Navy SEALs coming to train their cops. That's fine. That's your decision. But the police officers wanted us there. And my goal is not militarize police. That's not what we're doing. We're teaching how to work under stress and save lives. The other was you get some older police officers, and I say older, 20 to 30-year officers who can be on the training side, who feel like maybe we're kind of impinging on their area of expertise.
Right.
And they're cautious to bring somebody in to do that because they don't want to make themselves look bad.
Right.
At the end of the day, it hasn't stopped us from doing the training. And at the end of it, they're 100% on board because they don't know what they don't know. And typically that's what we're seeing. A couple of things. One, law enforcement doesn't train enough, right? They train 40 hours a year of in-service training that could encompass anything that they do on their job, not just tactics. And the rest of their training is on the job, which is great for the things you do on the job on a daily basis. But the majority of officers in this country will never see an active shooter.
Mm-hmm.
More than 50% of officers will never fire their service weapon in the line of duty. So how do you train for that type of critical response on the job when you're never going to do it? You can't, right? So when I talk about law enforcement training being antiquated, that's what I mean. There needs to be time set aside on a monthly basis for law enforcement to train for critical incident response and other things on the job that they don't see on a regular basis if we truly want to have the best possible response for these types of situations.
Man, what I think I'm going to do is I think I'm going to take this recording and send it to the principal, have him watch it, and then start to like initiate the conversation that way because I think it needs to happen and it would be awesome.
Does. I mean, it's funny, we talk about the fire drills. I don't know the exact date, but I don't think there's been a school fire since the 50s. Look it up, Google it. Because I grew up, my kids grew up, or still growing up, doing fire drills.
Yep.
And there hasn't been a fire in a school since the 50s, right? But we still do them. And our parents grew up doing nuclear, oh man, they got to drop a bomb
drills. Yeah.
California, they do earthquake drills, right? Which is more reasonable to me. But at the end of the day, if a building falls on you, I don't think getting under a desk is going to.
But what does that drill look like? Run. Yeah. Right?
As much as it sucks to sit here and talk about an active shooter drill, it is so beneficial to everybody involved to be prepared and hope it doesn't happen, right? Because hope isn't a strategy. Right. You got to be prepared for the worst case scenario. And unfortunately, we keep seeing these things happening. And we need to be assertive in finding how to best protect our kids. And, we have to entertain difficult conversations. And I know people don't like the idea of having guns in schools, but people also have this expectation that law enforcement is Navy SEALs coming to the rescue. And that's not the case.
Next, so this is interesting because the day that, and this is 2 weeks ago, man, it's only about 2 weeks removed, the day that the message goes out, and of course my son sees it, all the kids are seeing it, and he walks in and he's like, man, I am not going to school today. I'm like, you're fucking right, you're not. And so we call up the school, and the woman who's answering the phone at the front desk, hey, we're calling to let you know that Dylan's not coming to school today.
Yeah.
And she's like, can I ask you, is it personal or is he sick? And I was like, did you see what was sent out? And she was like, yes. And I was like, that's why. She says, I understand. I just want to let you know
Mhm.
we are going to do everything that we can to keep him safe. We understand that he's gonna be at home, but like I want you to know that we are doing everything that we can to keep him safe. And I didn't say anything, but of course it went through my head. What are you trained to do? What are you when you say that, what exactly does that mean? Because I get the response, but I would like to know exactly what that means. Training school staff, is that something, like you said, either needs to be entertained as part of this, aside from the drill, but like skill sets? And you just mentioned guns in school. So I'm just curious, Sully, like, does it go that far so that we're
Yeah,
supporting the responders? What do you think?
it could. Again, I only have so much money, and my mission right now is to make sure that the responding officers, the people with the guns, are trained. But
Right.
that doesn't mean I don't have those conversations with schools and school districts and teachers and principals, and I'm happy to vet anybody's active shooter response. Like whatever your protocol's in, send them to me. I'll look at them. I'll give you my best assessment on what I think is applicable or what needs to be tweaked or changed or whatever.
Mhm.
But it's really impingent on the people doing it to do these drills and to coordinate with local law enforcement.
Right.
And I mean, you got to think, if you can't vet police officers the way you vet development group SEALs,
Right.
right? You can't assess people based on their ability to handle stress, the ability to shoot, tactical acumen. If you started vetting officers to the degree that you vet tier one special operations, you wouldn't have
We
enough
would have
police,
police officers. Yeah, we wouldn't have
right?
anybody.
And
Yeah.
so there are police who respond to this situation who probably shouldn't even have a gun. And now they're walking into a situation that they're not qualified for, completely unprepared for, with a firearm. And the only thing on their mind is, I don't want to die, because
Yeah.
they have no idea to handle the situation. And the first person that runs around a corner is an innocent 11-year-old kid. What happens? And I mean, I can tell you from the scenarios we set up, I see officers take that shot. I specifically set up those scenarios to show them how stressful these situations can be. And this is in a training environment. Imagine a real world environment, right? And man, you want to see a light bulb go off. That's
Absolutely.
as sobering as it gets right there. And not just for the people involved in the training, but when their command staff comes and watches it and sees their officers fail in that environment, what do you think they're going to do in a real world environment, right? So it just highlights the need to do this training. But yeah, when we talk about the schools, right, and the ability to be able to quote unquote hold down or lock down or whatever it is until that response comes. I mean, if anything, that to me is why we need to have that conversation about armed security at schools. Like we protect everything that's important to what's in this country except for our schools. We put walls around anything that's important. We put armed guards, we put metal detectors, we do all these things. And in schools, there's no national standard. Some schools have that, some schools don't have that. Some schools have plans, which we've seen schools that have plans where the doors are locked and someone props a door open for ventilation, like Valdi. And
Yeah.
right, the plan's only as good as it's executed. And in a situation where you're risking your life, it's a lot easier to make that decision if you're already in the situation. Meaning, if you're a security guard armed in the school or a resource officer already there, it's a lot easier than if you're coming from outside the situation and now someone's asking you to insert yourself into a life or death situation. Which it's funny, after these happen, everybody says, "Oh man, I would have gone in there. I would have killed that dude. I would have done this. I would have done that."
Yeah.
Okay, dude.
Sure.
Yep. You can say that all you want on social media, but when push comes to shove and bullets are coming back at you, people make decisions based on what's important to them. And if your kid isn't that school, then your motivation to go in there and save lives isn't the same. And we saw that
Right.
in Stoneman Douglas, where the officer didn't go into school.
Yep.
So I guess what I'm getting at is all these things can be determined in training. Half, I would say probably 75% of the after action from Uvalde should have been determined, should have been conversations because of training events that highlighted that. Right? That's what we do. That's what we do in special operations is we train so that when we make those mistakes, we don't make them on the battlefield. And
Right.
I'm not certainly not comparing a school to a battlefield, but I'm comparing a critical incident to a critical incident. The only way you get better at managing a critical incident under stress is to train for critical incidents under stress. And
Yep.
that doesn't happen in law enforcement outside of SWAT teams almost at all. It's scary.
Dude, you're 40 hours then, just out of curiosity. And
Yep.
again, because now I'm thinking like my strength and conditioning mind, because you're saying all these things. There's an element of specificity. If you want to be able to train for that, you have to train for that and be in that environment, right? That's the
Like
only way you're going to
softball to not
develop.
tear your calf in softball, right?
Yeah, right. But then there's that other element that you said where, man, we're talking about fundamentals and
Yeah.
basics. So there's this continuum, right? Like the basics are not so specific as the right. You have there is there this continuum here, or is it like no, the basics are blah, you're in this situation, and then we'll just ramp it up. What
Yeah.
does it look like for you?
Well, let me make one comment first because it's anecdotal and I thought it was really telling. I made the comment about we don't protect the things closest to us, like our schools. I was in DC last week talking to senators, and I'm driving out of the city, and I drive past I think it's the National Institute of Peace, like PEACE, and it
Mhm.
had armed guards out front. And I just
Dude,
thought, well, man,
ooh,
like
I
how
relate.
ironic is that
Yeah,
that the National Institute of Peace in DC has armed
mm,
security and giant fences and all this stuff, and we can't protect the school.
yeah,
So, um, you know, as far as the training, what I tell the departments on our first call every time, 40 hours isn't enough.
yeah,
Not even close, right? We need access and availability of training monthly. And it doesn't all have to be active shooter or critical incident response, but there needs to be an op tempo, and then the military word, where law enforcement, if it were my world, if I could decide, if the president says, Sully, I want you to figure out how to fix this training problem, I would hire enough police officers so that they're on a rotation where they work 3 weeks a month and they train 1 week a month every month.
mm,
Right? So you have to hire a quarter more police officers to be able to pull people offline
right.
to train, but still have the same amount of people on the street. And then you could have a pretty, nationally standardized training schedule to where you can ensure that these critical incidents are being responded to the correct way. So when I deal with a department and I first get on the phone with them, I say 40 hours is not enough to fix the problem, but it's enough to identify the problem.
There you go.
And then you have to be there along the way to make steps to fix it. And what I mean by that is there's going to be a bunch of light bulb moments in the training. You're going to see why what you're doing isn't good enough because we're going to put you in these scenarios and you're going to fail. That is expected. Everybody fails. That's the point. And you're going to realize that if this happens real world, that there has to be a better way to do it. And you're going to walk out of that week feeling much more confident. And we're going to empower you with a lot more tactical knowledge and ability to be able to, right off the bat, the next day, have a better idea of what you're doing from the fundamental side to respond to that situation. And you're
Mhm.
going to feel safer and more empowered, and you're probably going to make better decisions. But you're also going to leave that course knowing that it's a perishable skill that needs to be worked on and sustained over time. You can't just come to a course once and not do it again. You can't go to a range and shoot one time and be a marksman, right? You have to go back and you have to repeat the process and you have to keep doing it so it becomes second nature. And,
Yep.
and that's, I think, where I see myself as an advocate for law enforcement reform on the training side. And the more credibility I get training departments and the more departments that see it, the more people I have backing that and advocating for me to do that.
Awesome. Dude, you and I met 16 years ago. It's fucking crazy to say 16
Because we're
years.
only 21. Yeah.
Right? I don't know how that happens. But we met 16 years ago. And you were preparing for the first element of your career.
Yeah.
Essentially. That training period in your life leading up to it. Can you give us some context of the road? Give us some of your background leading up to Green
Yeah.
Team.
So I don't know how far back you want to go, but you joined the military. I knew I wanted to be a SEAL. I joined specifically to be a SEAL. I wanted to be in the front lines. I didn't know what development group was at the time. I don't think I'd ever heard of it. So I went to boot camp. I went to my A school, we call it in the Navy, which is your MOS. You have to pick a job, or at least back then you did pick a job. So if you don't make it through BUDS, you go back to that job. And now I think that was a 12-week course. And then I went to BUDS. And BUDS is about an 8-month school. So you have your indoc PTRR, which is when you show up, it's just conditioning to be able to do it. And then you have first phase, second phase, third phase. First phase is the one that everybody usually hears about because that's when you go through Hell Week.
Hell Week, yeah.
And it's just, wake up every morning for 2 months and get some big dude to kick you in the junk like 10 times in a row. That's what BUDS is like, right? Yeah. And then do it every day and then know that it's coming every day for 2 months. It's when people talk about the mental side of it, it's knowing that you have to do it again the next day. And I would say that there's nothing for me and for most of the guys that come in shape, there wasn't any one evolution that was so physically tough or challenging that I couldn't make it through. It was the fact that you had to do it every day. Yeah. And then you had to go to second phase, and then you had to go to third phase, and then you get through that, you graduate, and then you have to go to SQT, which is SEAL qualification training, which is the next level. And it's another 6, 7, 8 months, I forget how much. And that's more, all right, now I just got kicked in the months for 8 months. Let's actually teach this guy something tactically that can be used when he goes up to the team with and he's not just broken. And nobody, BUDS is about a 70+% attrition rate, meaning that many people will quit. They don't get dropped in most cases. They quit because they don't have the ability to manage the stress of the situations that they're repeatedly being put under, or physically their body can't maintain what it needs to make it through, right? And it's common for people to get injuries, and it's common for people to quit, especially in the first couple of weeks. The bell just doesn't stop ringing. You ring the bell 3 times, that's how you quit. To this day, I won't ring a bell. Just mental thing. I won't do it. So I left SQT and I went to SEAL Team 2. So I've already been in the Navy almost 2 years, and I haven't even gone overseas. I had joined to go overseas and fight the fight after 9/11. 2 years in, or a year and a half in, and I just got to my team, and my team was coming back from deployment, which means I had a whole workup to do now, and that was another 18 months. So, yeah, it was frustrating because I was so young-ish and eager and aggressive and wanted to do my part, and I just kept having to go through training. And you think about that from a police officer who does, a minimal amount of training in their entire job, and then, all right, there you go, and that's it. And now I'm 3 years in before I'm even going on my first deployment to combat, and it's a training to work ratio that is really unparalleled. So I do my first deployment, and that's really when I started hearing about development group, about the Tier 1 SEAL teams. And I was at a crossroads because we did that first deployment to Iraq, and it was not what I expected. It was a lot slower just based on the time of year. There weren't a lot of operations. The one that we did, the operations we actually did, there wasn't a lot of excitement or action. And I didn't feel like I was doing what I joined to do, which was making a difference. And I thought, well, I came back off that deployment. I thought, you know what? I have at least one more deployment because I've got, I think I had 2 years on my enlistment at that point before my enlistment was up. I'm going to screen and see if I get picked up. So to go to development group, you have to screen, and they pick the best candidates from that screening process. And these are all SEALs who've already deployed, already have, training and 4 something years into teams. They pick it and they tell you, all right, you're in this next class, or, hey, we liked you, but we're going to hold you for one more class to get you more experience. And, our crew, obviously you saw who was in our class, and a lot of those guys that I went at Team 2 with got picked up for that same 08 class. Yeah. And we all screened around the same time. And then we finished our workup, went back on deployment. And after that deployment, we would class up with that green team. So that deployment for me was a lot of trying to figure out whether or not I wanted to do it, and a lot of having conversations with senior guys that didn't do it. And, I didn't really know any guys that were already over there to ask them, but I had another lousy deployment in that I didn't feel like I was getting to do what I wanted to do and why I had joined and wasn't make a difference. So I wanted to go somewhere where I was going to make a difference. And if that wasn't it, then I was going to get out of the Navy and try and do it on the civilian side. And it was I think it was like a 7-month deployment in Iraq. We had some operations, but not a lot. And I came off that deployment. My wife at the time wanted me to get out, and I wanted to get out. But at the end of the day, what it was just I had this overwhelming feeling that there was more for me to do.
Yeah.
And I knew if I got out, I would be filled with regret more so than I would anything else. And I had to at least try Green Team to see if I could make it to the command. And I did. So 2008, we started. That's when I met you. And I guess you say the rest is history because I made a career out of it after that point. So it was exactly what I wanted. That was why I joined the teams. The operations we did, the impact we made, I felt was significant. And the people that I worked with, specifically once I got there, is unparalleled to anything I've ever done in my life. And to me, the people, more so than the job, are what kept me going and kept me there.
People ask me what my favorite or most impactful experience has been in my career. I've done a couple of different things that I'm proud of. Nothing compares to that 2008 summer. Like nothing comes close to it.
Was that when I was dunking on you on the basketball court?
Yeah. You and Goat and everybody else that was yeah, dude. Easily, without a doubt. And it's funny, it was my first real project. So it was funny, like nothing compares to the first, I guess.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I've got 2 questions to ask you. Because you mentioned one and then I want to remember the other one. I remembered emailing I'll share his name, Kyle Milliken, and asking him. I think he asked me. I said, "What's the difference between you and the combine preparation guys?" Because I kind of get asked this all the time as like a comparison.
Yeah.
And he said, mentally, we don't break. I think is the main difference. The difference I think with us is our mentality. Like you had said it, you'll never ring a bell. And Kyle had said it in that email. He's like, we'll never stop. Sully, is that just who you are? Can you develop that? Are there tools that you've, either employed or have learned that you can teach other people? Like how, or is it like, nah, man, they're just some of us that are just built this way?
I certainly think it's a combination. I do think people are born with it. With that level of resiliency to overcome and not mentally beat themselves. I think you see it in top tier athletes. I think you definitely see it in our community. But I do think people have ability to learn and grow when it comes to that specific, what are we going to call it, like mental health or mental acuity. And whether it can be taught to a level that's going to get somebody through Green Team, I don't know. But can it be taught to a level to make someone more successful in everyday life? Absolutely. It absolutely can. And I do think there are people out there that are trying or are successfully doing that, but it requires someone being willing to learn and open themselves up and be vulnerable and realize that they need, like, hey, this is a fault. And I don't think there's many people out there that are willing to admit to being not mentally tough, specifically when they want to be better. Right? Because if you want everybody to think you're mentally tough, you're going to play the role like you're mentally tough and not try to get help. Right. So, I think that's a very limiting factor too. So, it's funny that Millie said that because, and you bringing up Green Team and how much it meant to you, to me, that was the hardest thing I've ever done. It was harder than Buds. I would do Hell Week again before I would do Green Team again. And Hell Week sucked because yes, Green Team was physically difficult, but nobody quits.
Right.
If you don't make it through Green Team, it's because you failed. You got dropped. And it doesn't make, especially I went back and I was an instructor there. It doesn't make you a bad SEAL. And there's a lot of guys that didn't make it through that went on to do amazing things at the teams when they went back to them. And it just means you're not good for that specific mission set or as good. And waking up every day and being assessed by your peers to the point where they're going to tell you can't be here is probably the worst single thing you could do to someone with that mentality. And it was very hard to get through. And it probably took years of my life, the level of stress at the end of this, especially during the CQB portion, which is the first 8 weeks or however long it is, where you're just like, I don't want to fuck up. I don't. Yeah. They're watching and they're like, how did they even see that? Like, I don't. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
And ironically, it's all part of the process, right? It's, as an instructor, I figured out, well, it's real easy because you know where they're going to fuck up. Like, you literally, these runs are set up for failure because you want to see how they react to failure and how they react to stress, which is why it's so stressful, because you're manufacturing that stress to see the type of person that is, to see if they mentally can handle it, can forget about the fact that they just called you a piece of shit because you couldn't figure out 6 to 8 inches off the wall. And they want to see you come back and do another run and not make that mistake again because, all right, I figured it out. I fucked it up. I'm not going to do that again. And you can move on from that stress, which a lot of people can't.
Right.
So, yeah, it's just, I guess that's a little anecdotal, but it was an amazing experience for me as well, not just for you, because that was my one and only time going through that process. And man, it was hard.
What advice would you give yourself 16 years ago going into it? Is there like what you've learned now? What would you say to Sully?
I think that course happened for me at the perfect time in my life. I wouldn't change anything about what I did or how I did it or who I did it with. I wish I had taken more time to enjoy it.
Yeah.
I wish I had more pictures, because you know how many guys we lost from that class. It was a small class, and we lost quite a few guys over the years after that, and in extortion and then in other incidents. So, and I miss them, and I wish I could just pull up pictures from that time because, like buds, I tell people buds is the worst time or the best time I never want to do again. Right. Because I have so many memories from buds that in relationships still that will never be compared to because you've not suffered with somebody the way that we suffered together through that program. And Green Team is very similar. It's not the physical suffering as much as it is the mental suffering, but that is a connection you will have with those guys that you will never be able to recreate. And I wish we had, I guess, documented it more throughout the time. It just wasn't something, we didn't have the iPhones back then. I think Millie was the only one because he was bougie, but
yeah.
But we weren't doing it the way we do it now, where everything is a picture, and it was really frowned upon more so back then than now to do that stuff. So, but it sucks. There's a lot of times in my career where, man, I wish I had a picture of that or,
Yeah, dude. And it's interesting because I remember I like writing, and I mean I was gone for 10 weeks, and family members had no idea like where I was, who it was really being done with. And I remember talking to one of the cadre who I was close to, and I was like, man, can I write about some of this? I'm not going to mention names, I'm not going to say things, but like this is an experience that I would like to document like in some way, shape, or form. And he was very cool with it. I remember I'd send it to him, read it over, let me know if it's cool. Yeah, it's all right, maybe take this out. And you mentioned it being frowned upon, because I remember thinking, man, yeah, I want to be really respectful of this process. Is it less frowned upon now, Sully?
I just think that social media and cameras and technology has become so commonplace that it's really hard to keep it out. And it's funny, you see the older guys and the newer guys, and there's definitely a cultural shift when it comes to that type of stuff. And when I talk about it, I don't mean on target or the combat or any of that stuff. I mean the social part of it, the good times when we're hanging out, drinking beer. It wasn't really till later on that we started actually taking pictures and trying to remember that. And I wish I had done that in buds. I wish I had more stuff back then, and certainly in Green Team. But it's you can't not do it nowadays. It's so much harder.
Yeah. I asked this question to everybody. This is like one of two canned questions in whenever
Okay.
I do this. I didn't give you a heads up, so if you don't have it, cool.
Son of a bitch.
I know. It can be anything, dude. It can be anything. I see you with your Patriots cup. It can be anything.
I should probably. Can you black that out for me right now?
Oh yeah, I was gonna put on a Bengals shirt, and after last night, I was like, I'm not fucking wearing that shirt. No, thank you. Yeah, same. Hey, Sully, man, you've got a wealth of experience. You've been through a million things, man. Free resources, book, person, podcast. I don't care what it is. But if I just said, hey, what are three things that you would say either this helped me out, or I read this, I love this, or I like this? Doesn't even have to be like, yeah, this will help your life. Just I enjoyed this. Just three things. If somebody were to ask you, you'd be like, listen to this person, or read this book, or listen to this album, whatever.
And I won't give you a specific.
Mhm.
But I think the first thing I would say, and I do tell this to guys now, is when you get out, you have to have a network.
Yes.
Right. So work on developing that. And with that comes vulnerability, right? Admitting to yourself that you're not good at something and being willing to go to someone and ask for help.
Yeah.
And, I am not good at starting a business. I had no idea what I was doing. And I reached out to a lot of people that I've met throughout the years outside of the military that have done this. And some on the nonprofit side, some on the for-profit side, legal side. And I picked their brains. And, I found the people that wanted to help me. And I think I got in a lot of doors because I can drop that SEAL moniker. And when I got there, I took advantage of it, and I picked their brains any chance I could get to learn how to do this job better,
Mm.
and that helped me significantly. The second thing is read, and it doesn't matter what the book is or audio tape or even podcast or whatever. It's find someone that's doing what you want to do and learn from them and find out what got them to that spot and then go
Yeah.
find that information and learn it. And if you're in the military or you're in your first career and you're going to be going to second career, don't wait till you're done to start doing it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Kind of what I did is because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I waited, and I wouldn't even say I sought out the nonprofit. The nonprofit sought me out, and
Yeah.
I just saw the problem came to me one day, and I can fix that. And it all started instantly for me where, okay, now I have to learn how to start a business. My for-profit business was easy because just, hey, you pay me this, I'll come train you.
Right.
And the nonprofit is I don't have time to train anymore, which is both good and bad. It's good because we grew so quick that I do business development and fundraising, period. That's it. And I have been able to hire people to do the training that come from my same background that are knowledgeable about what they do. And it's a great place to be able to trust somebody like that. And the third thing for me, and I give this advice too, chase happiness, not money.
Ooh.
Right? Because if you find your happiness, the money's going to come. And if it doesn't, who gives a fuck? You're happy. Right.
I love it.
And for me to do that, there were two things I needed. I needed something service related because I get happiness and I get my mental health and how I deal with my traumas of the past is I help other people. And starting the nonprofit, and there's another nonprofit that I work with and I'm on the board of called One Summit, which was Adam LaRue, who was another SEAL that I worked with at the squadron. And we provide resiliency mentorship to pediatric cancer patients. And we take them rock climbing, which who would have thought to take a cancer patient rock climbing, especially a child. But it has done so much for our mental health as SEALs with our own trauma and for those kids and realizing like, hey, you know what? I can do this. I can set goals and I can achieve them. It is just an amazing thing. So I've always had that mentality of wanting to help and doing service. And then surrounding myself with the right people. And I told you earlier that I will never work with a better group of guys than I did when I was at that command, which is why those are the guys I'm hiring.
Right.
Right. So those are the guys that I want to work with. And for the most part, that is all my trainers. And I've been really lucky to meet some officers along the way that I've been able to bring into the fold and some donors along the way that I've been able to ask to be on my board and the people that have been giving me the knowledge along the way that I have brought into this nest that I'm creating because it makes me happy, and it allows me to help other people, and it's game changer, man. It's life changing for me, and that's how I transitioned. That's what has gotten me to this point right now. Just those three simple things.
Dude, simple, not easy, but fucking spot on.
It's not easy, but you got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And start, right?
start
Like start.
one foot in front of the other, right? We talked about it. Crawl, walk, run. That's how we
Yeah.
teach these cops. It's the same for me coming into the business world. Crawl, walk, and run. And I'm sure if someone looked at my, the stuff that I've done, they'd probably think I was an idiot. And maybe I am, but hey, at least I'm trying to learn, and I'm I'm not throwing money away and driving this thing into bankruptcy. So I'm doing something right, right? But
Yeah.
there's not a day that goes by that I'm not trying to learn something new to make this organization better.
Before we hop off, man, can you tell me just a little bit more about One Summit?
One Summit. So One
Yeah.
Summit's the pediatric cancer one that Adam LaRue started.
Yeah.
That's the one that I'm on the board for. It's
Uh-huh.
out of Boston. We use SEALs, and both active duty and retired, and we do these events in Boston, New York, Virginia Beach, and San Diego, and we call them a Climb for Courage, where we bring in kids from the local hospitals who are undergoing treatment for pediatric cancer, and also their siblings. We pair them up for a one-on-one mentorship with the SEAL, and they spend the day rock climbing. And we encourage this to be an ongoing relationship as well, as long as they're on board and the parents are on board. So they have someone that they can turn to when they need it. That's outside of their immediate network.
You know me, we got to get that in Phoenix.
Yeah, I know, right? Would love to.
Yeah.
Virginia Beach, San Diego, there's so many SEALs there.
For sure.
Boston is where they're living now, but man, it's we were looking at DC because there's a lot of pediatric cancer hospitals there. It's where the facilities are, and not a lot of hospitals are 100% on board with supporting that level of exertion for kids. So it's been a couple of roadblocks for them to overcome. But man, every hospital that gets on board, it grows immediately because it is such a cool, novel idea that takes these kids out of their comfort zone and allows them to succeed and have that, which is missing from their lives at the moment in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
It's not a make a wish. It's not a one and done. It's a relationship.
Right.
And made community first, c1p.org.
Yep.
Any help that I can get from anybody listening, I will take. I'm never afraid to have a conversation. Any police officers that want to talk, we're happy to talk. We would love to start fundraising in your area and start bringing this out there, because there's a bunch of SEALs that have retired to that area. And, part of what I like to do is when guys move back to their hometown and they're looking for that transition, that job to get them through that year or two where they're transitioning. Well, why not use your knowledge base to give back and do something service oriented and feel good about yourself and share that knowledge and make a little bit of money as well. So, any ideas you have for that, by all means, let's talk offline and try and figure it out.
Let's connect, man, for sure. I'm serious about that.
Thank you.
As far as like getting it out here, and for sure.
Thank you.